Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I appreciate those of you that are already jumping on live. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with us today. As you know, the Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, we are talking about the gap between selfless and selfish. We have Dawnita Brown here to share her teachings on an action she calls self-full, which I just love. At one time, Dawnita was set on becoming a global citizen with a vision board filled with adventure and volunteer work. In 2018, that vision came to a streaking halt when her mother had a stroke. She watched as her life pivoted drastically to long-term caregiver. With vibrancy still bubbling from within, she saw an opportunity to build upon her situation. Dawnita now educates, equips, and encourages caregivers to live a life of selfullness while caring for their loved ones. Welcome, Dawnita. How are you?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me, Sabrina. I love the intro. Thank you.
Girl, you got a lot going on over there. And I loved hearing your story. And I'm so excited to hear more and the vision, just the vision that you have for you, for what you're building. I think that it's so necessary, and it's so crazy because things happen in our lives, and sometimes it could kind of be like, and then sometimes individuals who have these things come upon them turn them into just something that is so necessary. And I think that that is your story. So I would love, before we jump into anything, I kind of want to just what's going on? What's going on now? Tell us a little bit something of something good that's happened within the last 12 months, something not so good that's happened within the 12 months, just so we can get a feel for kind of where you are now in your life. And then we're going to jump in.
Okay, sounds good. So, over the 12 months, actually, in the beginning of the year, I said that this is my quest to self love. For so long, I have been my worst critic. And I said, let me give myself some grace. So, I am a full-time caregiver, but as you mentioned, I've also turned my mess into my ministry, which means that I started a business. I have merchandise for caregivers, as well as a support group for Black daughters specifically that are caring for their parents, called the Binti Circle. And I offer coaching and consulting, as well as a podcast called the Selfull Caregiver Podcast. So these things have definitely materialized over the past 12 months. However, the struggle has been doing it all within the past 12 months. So it's a lot being a full-time caregiver, that is my priority, and then trying to do everything else and thinking about numbers and goals and all of that I had to really stop and give myself some grace and to prioritize. And I think that's so important for all of us. And it goes along with being selfful. And as you said, it's that sweet spot between selfish and selfless. And while I really tailor it toward caregivers, it is everybody, right? We're constantly giving of ourselves, being selfless. We think it's a badge of honor when in reality it's reckless. And then we feel like we're selfish, being selfish when we say no or I can't do it, or I'm going to take a day for myself, or 2 or 3 or a week. We feel selfish. So getting into that place of selffulness where you're doing both, you're taking care of yourself so that you can better do whatever you need to do and take care of others. So I would say the best is being able to see the gifts and the visions that God has given me for helping other caregivers. And then on the flip side, God, how do I do it all? Or do I do it all at once? So that's the challenge, and really trying to figure out what matters most at this point, what to focus on, what to really hone in on. And so I think the business part is where I struggle. So again, that's been kind of like that struggle part for me.
I get it.
I'm on the struggle bus.
I totally get that. I want to send just a quick shout out to those that are jumping on live right now. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with Dawnita and I. Since we have a room full right now, Dawnita, I would love for you to kind of share. I think that your story is so incredible, and I'd love for you just to kind of, share a little bit about your journey and what's gotten you to where you are now.
Okay, so my journey started way back when I was in high school, and I wanted to be a radio broadcaster. And so I was discouraged from doing that. And, I went to college. I majored in mass comm the first year, and then switched over to business management. So I think throughout that time in my life, before I was in relationship with God, I was just kind of doing everything, and not really seeking what he wanted me to do for my life. And so out of that, I became a stay in school student with the federal government. So while I was in undergrad, I got a job with the federal government. And so back in the early 90s, that was like the best job, right? So you thought about government and security and all those things. And so I was there for 9 years. I became a building manager for General Services Administration. And that's when I got in a relationship with God. Oh, you know what? After a rough breakup. So we're transparent, we're honest here. In 1998, I met a married man. And so I started dating him, and I was young. I was very impressionable. And so I, was 9 years younger. And so I dated him for 2 years. And then after the 2 years, that's when, he got separated. I thought we were going to be together, only to find out we weren't. So it was like this big loss for me. And so when when God found me after that really, really bad decision making. And then as a result, bad breakup. And so that's when God found me, and I got closer to him. And then like early 2000 is when, we broke up, and my life changed. I said, God, I want to live for you. I want to live for you. And like I said, I was a stay in school student, and I worked for the federal government. I had gone from a grade 3 to a grade 12. And at that point, it just felt like I was not fulfilled. I was making the money, I had the grade, but I was not fulfilled. So in order to justify me resigning from a good government job, I enrolled into 2 master's programs. Now I had already had 1 master's, because in order to be in a stay in school program, you had to be in school. So I found a master's program just so I could keep my job without having to go out through the civil service and apply and all that. So I registered for two graphic design programs. These are very high intensive project driven programs. So I took one at Maryland Institute College of Arts and University of Baltimore. So it's like, why am I doing this? So at that point, I felt like I was going to just slip my wrist, because it was so much.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to 2004, my grandmother got sick, diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. So I took care of her. And then I just, I resigned. I resigned from the federal government and I started consulting. I got a part-time job with a wonderful organization called The Leadership. And I really started coming into my own in terms of doing things that I wanted to do. Like I co-founded girls organizations. I was a huge youth advocate. I was teaching kids. I was doing all of the things. And then in 2008, I was like, you know what? I'm doing way too much to make ends meet. So I'm doing like all these many different wonderful things. But again, it was just it was a lot. It was a whole lot. So in 2008, I applied for a full-time job, and I won't say the place where I work, but just know that it's a very prestigious place and it's a place to be from, not a place to be. So I worked there for not even a couple of months, I think 1 month, a couple of days before I realized this is not for me. Like it was very, let's say I was making $5,000 less in 2008 than I was in 2002 with the federal government. I was working way more hours.
Wow.
I was working on the weekends. I was traveling. I was doing all these things. I said, this is not healthy at all.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to my folks in the federal government, and I actually ended up back in the same office that I had left for the same agency. And I just started working there. I was making $27,000 more. So this was in 2009. And so God just brought that full circle where if you step out on faith and trust me, I got you. So when my mother, we actually had it was terrible. She was like, I can't believe you quit your job, all that, because she worked for Internal Revenue Service. We worked in the same building. She was a grade 11. I was a grade 12. And she was like, I can't, so I ended up back in the same agency, the same office. They actually, because I was trying to get rid of everything, all of my leave was like, I'm never going back to the federal government. Never say never. I ended up, I had sick leave on the books, like a week and a half of sick leave. So they reinstated all of that. And so everything was great. I went back, I had my work-life balance. And then into a former colleague from GSA had called me. She was at another agency. And she was like, we have a job here, would you be interested in health and wellness? And this is before wellness was sexy. Like I didn't know what wellness was. I had to look it up. So she was saying you'll be able to do your graphic design. You'll be able to do wellness. You'll be able to do event coordinating, all of this stuff. And I said, well, it sounds good. Long story short, I got that position. I was the wellness coordinator for CMS, and it's for Medicare and Medicaid services for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely loved it. I started a farmers market on campus. It was the largest program for employees, and it was all around health and wellness. And I absolutely loved it. And then in 2014, my dad was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a treatable, not curable cancer. He lives in LA. I flew to LA. I thought I was going to be there for 2 weeks. I ended up there for 4 months. So I was teleworking before, again, folks were teleworking, and then my manager just was not understanding. And so I said, when I come back, I want to go on a detail just away from her for a while. So they say you quit people, not jobs. And that's essentially what I did. And so I put in for a detail with the training team. And when I returned from taking care of my dad in 2014, I went on a detail. Actually, I started the detail, in 2015, because I went back to LA. He had a procedure done. So I was back in LA for 2 months. And so I got picked up permanently with the training team. And in the training team, we facilitate several classes. So I needed to be certified for some of the classes that we teach. And so one of them is the Myers-Briggs type indicator, MBTI. Yeah. And so I had this, it was a lot that went along with that, the story. I'm going to have to write it all in my book because the details are just like crazy. So anyway, I'm going to, you guys go with me. I'm in Herndon, Virginia. in the Marriott where the training is. And so the day of the training, I walk into the banquet room and I pick a table out of all these tables, 20 tables in the banquet room. I sit at this one table and I'm around all of these folks that have done international work. And so I sit next to this lady that talks about her experience with the Peace Corps. She had served in the Peace Corps. And so I was like, I thought you aged out of Peace Corps because, mind you, I'm a federal employee at the time. I wanted to work as an expat, which means that I would get paid and get my cost of living while I'm working. And she said, I served in the Peace Corps and I served in Senegal. And she was talking about her counterpart. And at the time, I did not know what that meant, in terms of Peace Corps. And I said, well, I thought you aged out of Peace Corps. And she said, no, I thought it was for college students, like straight out of college. She said, no, she said, Jimmy Carter's mom served in India as a Peace Corps volunteer in the 60s when she was in her 60s.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm single. I don't have any kids. At the time, my dad was healthy, and still is, and thank God. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to join the Peace Corps. So, of course, everybody thought I had lost my mind. At the time, I had 2 cars. I had my dream car. I had my older car, which was my dream car at the time. So I still had those 2. And I needed to downsize, like all of the things. I served in Swaziland, and Swaziland is where my bishop from a couple of years ago had served. I mean, well, not served, but she was the bishop over Swaziland. So there were some dots that were being connected. My cousin's cousin at the time was the ambassador. So it felt like confirmation to me. I had taken Esther, the Bible study Esther, and I felt like for such a time as this, right, for me. And so I'm thinking of all these things. I feel like God is just sending me all these confirmations. And so I joined the Peace Corps in June of 2016. And my job was gracious enough to give me a leave of absence. It was leave without pay. But my job was my job for 3 years. I had 3 years to, serve, come back, get readjusted, and then go back to work. So I had an incredible service. I co-founded an organization for girls in U.S. and Africa called Black Girls Global Exchange. We brought 18 girls over from the States to, exchange with their Swazi and South African peers. It was beautiful. It was incredible. This was in March of 2018. All of my friends came over. I had friends come over throughout the summer. And I was like, yes, this is great. I'm seeing all my friends. I was able to send things back home with them because I knew that I wanted to travel light because I was going to do an end of service trip. So I was traveling to Egypt, Senegal, Ghana, and then I was going to do a healing yoga retreat in Boston before I came home. Well, this was in August. I'm planning my trip to Ghana specifically because my ancestry traces back to the Fanti people in Ghana. So I'm really excited about that. And, I was going to be there for 2.5 weeks. And so it was around 10 p.m. my time in Eswatini. And I'll probably use Eswatini and Swaziland interchangeably because the king changed the name from Swaziland to Eswatini in 2018. But I called my dad because of the time difference, it was hard for us to really connect. He was in LA. I was in Swaziland. It was a 10-hour difference. So I called him. And when I called him, I could hear him say, "This is her on the phone now." And I said, "Well, who are you talking to?" And he said, "I'm talking to your Aunt Jean, who is my mom's sister." And so I'm thinking, like, it's August. It's nobody's birthday. Like, why are y'all talking kind of thing, And so he said, "She can hear you talking to my aunt." And my aunt said, "Tell her that Joan is on life support." Joan being my mother. And so I lost it. I mean, I'm over 8,000 miles away. I find out my mother's on life support. I'm planning these incredible trips And now I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. And so I'm sitting in my dining room slash office, because I had a one room rendezvous in Eswatini. And so I'm sitting there, and then I just lost it. Like I was rolling on the floor. I had marble floor, and it was July, so it was cold. So the cold floor. And um, I don't know how long I was on the floor, just, you know, and then when I got back to the phone, my dad was like, I'm glad you got it all out. And then it was just like, okay, what do I do? So I called um, Peace Corps and informed them on what was going on. And then I called my host family, which we lived on the same homestead, but I had my own dwelling. And they came over, and we were just praying that my mother would live for me to say goodbye. And so um, Peace Corps was 2.5 hours away. So they asked me if I wanted to come into the office. But my family lived only 20 minutes away from the airport, and they had a car. So I said, well, no, I'm going to stay here and let them take me to the airport. And they were like 3 flights out of Eswatini to go into Johannesburg. Johannesburg was the flight that I was taking to Atlanta. Well, it was, to Baltimore, but I had a layover in Atlanta. So I wanted to take the latest flight out of Eswatini because I didn't want to have to sit in the airport all day.
Got it.
There was a lot going on. So anyway, I get to the air. The flight was delayed from Eswatini. I arrive in Atlanta. I'm sorry. I arrive in Johannesburg. I get on the shuttle. I'm looking around. I sit right by the door for the shuttle. And this woman gets on, and she said, "Who's going to Atlanta?" And I'm like, "Me." And so she was like, "Okay, well, we got to go because the flights, are going to." So we got off of the shuttle. And for all of you that are, remember the OJ commercial when he was running through the airport sprinting. If you're old enough, sprinting, I think it was like a Hertz commercial or something like that. That's how we were running through the airport. She was flashing her badge and saying, "Hey, I have to get her to the gate." It was almost like she was a guardian angel.
Wow.
She grabbed my laptop. She was running ahead of me, and I got very winded. And I was just like, "Go, go. I can't go anymore. Just go." And so she got to the gate, checked me, and told them everything. So by the time I got there, I could just sit down. And it was just it was crazy how it
Wow.
happened. It was almost like surreal.
Mhm.
And then when the flight, it was just they were boarding like as soon as I sat down. So I got on the flight, and when I got on the flight, I just started just crying, like
Yeah.
I mean bawling, and it was uncontrollable. And I'm walking to my seat, and people looking like I was thinking, people like, I hope she'll sit next to me. Like I'm thinking they thought probably I was probably scared of flying. I had a fear of flying, and probably like, please don't let her sit next to me. But I sat I sat in the middle, so in between they were the nicest gentlemen. The one on the left was a nurse practitioner, and he was flying into Minnesota. He was Zimbabwean. And then the one on the right, no, I'm sorry, he was Kenyan. Then the one on the right, he was, I can't remember where he was from, but they both just encouraged me. I finally told them after I got myself together what was going on. And they encouraged me. And the nurse practitioner, I was just like, I work out every day. I walk 2.5 miles each way to get into town. And I'm like, what is wrong? And he said, it's the stress. It's all the adrenaline. That's what really winded you. And so I was, you know, so I get to Atlanta. I called my cousin. There I didn't have service because, of course, I just had a SIM card, and thank God for Wi-Fi. My cousin picks me up. We drove to Bayview, Johns Hopkins, where my mother was in neurocritical care, and that started my caregiving journey. Like after that, that's my life has changed. Like I mean, I could. These are the things that we should embrace. you can make plans, but God is the best of planners. And he's the best of planners. So we have to be flexible. Um, we can't say what we won't do or can't do because you don't know until you're put in that situation. And we have to have an open mind. Like flexibility is key to life because it's ever changing and you have to be ready for the change. And so it took me a minute to get there, but that my life became caregiving full on. I didn't even identify as a caregiver with my grandmother and my father when I provided caregiving to them. I didn't even identify as one. So I think a lot of people don't. We just kind of do what we need to do. But navigating a healthcare system, having to deal with, having conversations with a social worker, knowing what to ask for, knowing what is available, knowing what's not covered, knowing the rights that you have, knowing how to advocate. I was thrusted into all of that with no one and no resources that I was aware of at the time that could help me. So I was super overwhelmed. And that's how everything with Hey Caregiver was birthed.
When did you find out that she was going to live?
Well, it was touch and go for a couple of months. So it was around October 2018 when she was discharged from neurocritical care or from the hospital to a short-term rehab facility. They're called skilled nursing facilities. And this was after I did all of my research to get her at a place that I wanted her to be, because a lot of times they will just discharge really quickly without the families
Oh,
having
wow.
any say. Yeah, they'll say we chose this place, and maybe you haven't visited or you haven't spoken with anyone there. So it was October 2018 when they discharged her to short-term rehab, and she was doing okay with the recovery. So although she was living, she was just existing. So I was okay with her transitioning because she was just existing. And I felt like I want her to live, I want her to thrive. And so she was bedridden. She was nonverbal. And so after 2 months, she was discharged. She plateaued in her therapy. So they discharged her in December of 2018. She came home with me. And so, of course, that was a huge learning curve. But she got sick in December of 2018. So she ended up back in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And once she was there, I had her discharged to the short-term rehab again because she had 100 days for therapy. And while there, she kept vomiting and everything. And we ended up taking her. She had a cardiology appointment. This was in January 2019. We got to the hospital and the ER doctor said that, well, we were waiting all day. They ran tests on her because you could just hear like air in her stomach. And so the ER doctor, when he finally determined what was wrong, he came back to us it looked like as if he had seen a ghost. And he said she has pneumatosis of the intestines. And we have to rush her to Good Samaritan, which is the other hospital, because they have equipment that we need. So make a long
What
story
is that?
short.
Wait, what is that she had?
So pneumatosis of the liver.
Yeah.
So it was like air in the bowels. And then she had something else that's called colitis. And so
How do you
basically,
get air in the bowels?
so it could have been from her feeding tube, neglect really from the nursing home, to be honest. Because she was vomiting and they said that she was constipated. They did an x-ray and determined that she was constipated, but they did not have the equipment to do a CT scan. So it just so happened that the doctor was there that day. And so the nursing home doctor, normally he has biker's hours. He would be there at 9, 10, 11 p.m. So he just happened to be there during the day. He said, well, I don't know why she keeps vomiting. We'll send her out. And that's what happened. We get to the hospital. They tell me that we have to do surgery on her stomach. If we don't, then she's going to die within 2 days. So this was January of 2019. And so I said, I talked to her. I said, Ma, I said, they want to do surgery. If you have surgery, you'll have a colostomy bag. It'll be an uphill battle. And so I asked them to just treat her conservatively with medication, antibiotics. After she was there for a couple of days, they were like, well, we're going to recommend her to hospice. And so they recommended her for hospice, and she actually got accepted into inpatient hospice. And this was February. So January, she was there. And then February, it was like early February. And so, I'm sorry, it was January when I got when they gave her the prognosis of 2 days. And so it's kind of like the end of January. And so they treated her with medication after she was accepted into in-home hospice. And the doctor, I remember going into the hospital, the doctor said, we're not God, only God could do this. Like it was a miraculous recovery. So they ripped up the papers at inpatient hospice. But when she was discharged in February, they enrolled her into in-home hospice. And so she was at home hospice. And after 3 months, she just started improving and improving and improving. And so she graduated from hospice. And now we are on 3.5 years of her not just living and surviving, but thriving. We watch television together. That's that Selfull piece. We do a lot together. We watch game shows. I have equipment where we're able to get her downstairs and out. And I found a van on Nextdoor for $4,000 that my dad got us. So, I'm able to get her around and get her out and able to have her really, really have a life, although she's still bedridden. So it wasn't like an immediate thing, like, okay, she's going to live, she's going to be, good. It was really touch and go. And then even with that setback, it was still touch and go. But it was probably, I would say, a solid 1.5 years before we realized that, okay, she's good now. So much so I'd be like, okay, God, it's been 4 years now. Like, I'm not ready for her to go anywhere, but I'm just like, okay, I'm single. It's almost like I have this huge responsibility now. Can't just up and go like I used to, all of those things. But I'm grateful to have the opportunity to care for her, and love really plays a huge part in recovery.
Definitely. When you think about your whole journey, which that's a lot that you've done, overcome, done, accomplished, what would you say is your biggest challenge you've endured?
I would say it's really that part of giving myself grace. Like, I feel like I've always felt like I wasn't doing enough. I could do more. I could be better, so overcoming me, you know what I mean? Overcoming the me that gets in my own way has been the greatest challenge just throughout my life. And it's just recently that I'm being kinder to myself, to accept what happens. Like I said, of course, incidents, like, they're challenges in and of itself, right? So my mother getting sick, that was a huge challenge. I've overcome it. My mother being bedridden as a result, a huge challenge. I've overcome it. my life changing the way that it has, it's kind of like I've overcome it and I've gotten to a certain place. But it's that nagging critic that even throughout all of the things that I've been able to overcome is still nagging at me or saying hurtful things, and so that's been my hugest challenge.
Definitely, I could see that. When you think about, well, first of all, how did you come to realize that you needed to work on that? Did you read? Is this a YouTube? Is this a video? Is this a mentor? Is this a coach? How did you recognize that that was even an issue?
All of the above.
Really?
Yeah, therapy, even friends, talking to friends, talking to myself, talking to God, reading books, Googling and realizing you're not alone. Some stuff that you don't want to share is like secret stuff, and you Google and be like, wait a minute, other people have that issue too, And so it's like all of the above, and then I got to a place where I realized it was counterproductive. Like, it's not helping anything. So the only way to
What's counterproductive?
Counterproductive is being really hard on yourself.
Yeah, okay.
Being critical of yourself. Not giving yourself grace. That's counterproductive. It's not going to get any better. So let's change this mindset that you're having. And that's why I said the beginning of the year, I did this blog. This is the year of life journey to self-love, the quest to self-love, something like that. I titled it, but it was just like, because I want to be the best version of myself. And when you're negative and critical, you're blocking who you can become. We're constantly evolving. We're never going to be at the pinnacle, because the pinnacle is perfection, and that's not realistic. However, we can certainly change some things, right? Instead of, even if you think it, because we're human. So it's not like we're never going to think anything. But as soon as you think it, be like, oh, wait, hold up. Let's fill it with a positive thought. You know what I mean? Let's turn it around, like with my mother, she's not able to walk, so she's bedridden. But guess what? I can run errands. I can talk to you on this podcast without having to worry about her getting up, walking, and falling, or things like that. So just looking at things from a different perspective.
Definitely, 100%. In your journey through therapy and book reading and following whoever you follow, I'm sure you've come across the thoughts or the theory or the knowing of limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to know what has been a big limiting belief that you've kind of had to look into and disintegrate.
So I think that my greatest issue, and we're being transparent, right? My greatest issue is physical makeup, right? I'm short. I'm 5 on a good day. It's just a lot of things that I would change if I could. But I also think about, I'm who God created me to be, right? So when I think about things that would hinder me, they are sometimes there to help me, right? So when we believe certain things, we put in our mind that will hinder us, limit us, is changing it around. My hands are small, they're very tiny, right? But guess what? I do a whole lot with my hands for my mother. You know what I mean? So it's like these beliefs that we make up, and a lot of them are made up in our minds, is thinking on what they can do, right? So instead of looking at it as something that is limiting, how can it be positive? How can it be productive, if you will? How can it propel you versus stopping you or hindering you?
Yeah. And when you're talking about that now, how often, a week, a month, or a year, whatever, do you have to remind yourself
Oh,
of
almost
that?
daily.
Yeah. Well,
Almost
because a
daily.
lot of times people get down on themselves because they're like, I know better. I shouldn't be doing this. And then it runs through a cycle of like guilt of knowing that it's a limiting belief or something that they need to kind of like squash and get over, and then they're not. So I love to highlight that, like, yeah, and we still sometimes think about it.
And download the I Am app for reminders, and read devotionals, and I look for signs in everything, right? So my birthday is 213. So whenever I see any combination of 213, I feel like, okay, God, I know you got me. You know what I mean? So even if something happens, I think so, and then I see that, I say, okay, I know you got me. You know what I mean? So it's really championing yourself. You know what I mean? So it's, yeah,
That's awesome. Sometimes we need a reminder of that.
absolutely.
I know, even myself as a coach, and I'm sure you can attest to this, we feel as if we need to have all our shit together
Yep.
and know all of the things.
Yep.
And come into the real realization when you get into this industry and you're, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years in, and realizing I also need reminders. I also have to remind myself and reaffirm for myself, who I am and what I stand for. So, being transparent, as you've mentioned
Yep.
today, is so important, so that when we are talking to our clients or our audience, we can be real with like, hey, it's a knowing. It's not a like forever changing sometimes. It's realizing that these thoughts do come and flow and go in and out, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's like my friend had to remind me the other day. She was like, "Girl, you are fabulous. You are doing it," because she came over to my house, and I have beautiful just curb appeal, and I have a beautiful, I call it my oasis out back, and I have my plants and just everything. My house is clean. And she said, she looked around like, "You do all of this and take care of your mother and have the podcast and doing this," and I'm just like, you know what? I am. Like my house
Yes.
is clean. I could walk through and really love my home. I can invite people in. I love to invite people over and entertain. And yes, I do all of that. And I'm taking care of my mother full time. It was like, even the reminders come from so many different ways. It could be
Yeah.
a person, like I say, it could be a devotional, it could be whatever. So it was almost like, thank you for that. I needed to hear that today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I needed to hear that to because a lot of times we compartmentalize, right? So we only think of one thing and don't realize the magnitude of all of what we're doing and all of who we are.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I love about this podcast is like there's so many stories and like warrior stories out there that people are just like, that's just my story. What?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I had to do to survive. What? And it's like, that is super inspirational. Like, you need to be patting yourself on the back every single day that you're here and you're kicking it in the fashion in which you are doing it. People need to know that and learn from that and see that, because sometimes we're struggling.
Yes. Like I said, I'm
Mhm.
on a struggle bus today. I just submitted an application for a grant. I'm planning a respite retreat for family caregivers, ladies of my Binti circle, and we're planning it for November, which is National Family Caregivers Month. And so I have my proposal done and all, and I've been just working on it. And of course, I do a lot of things that aren't income generating, like right off the top, but I get so much fulfillment out of that, and I'm so grateful. I do want income now that the world is opening up. I realize how expensive it is to travel. And I'm like, wait, I do need an income now. Yeah, to maintain my travel, my love for travel. But the impact that I make is so fulfilling. When I hear women talking about what the Binti Circle means to them, it's so fulfilling. When I hear someone say that a podcast episode really resonated with them, that is so meaningful and impact. That's what fulfills me. It's like, okay, I've probably sold I don't know how many shirts or retail. I have not done a lot in that realm, but the impact that I made, it's priceless.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think is the meaning of life?
I think the meaning of life is to be on purpose, is to live on purpose, is to discover your why, and your why will change. My why when I was in Eswatini was to serve the community. I was community health volunteer, right? My why now is for other caregivers and for my mom. So it will change. Like this part of my life, you would not have been able to tell me that this would be my life, Sabrina, like at all. I've been unemployed. No, I'm not going to say unemployed. I've been an unpaid family caregiver and a trying to be, not trying to be, I'm an entrepreneur that is not, like I say, the income is not quite there yet. However, I know that it's on purpose, that I'm not just spinning wheels and I'm not just grasping for straws, that I'm really living a life that I've been called to live at this time of my life.
Yeah.
So that's when I think the meaning of life, I think is to live on purpose and to, know who you are and why you were created. And it may change, but that's the meaning of life to me.
100%. I definitely hear you on all angles with that. Can you tell us a little bit more about this self-fullness?
Yes. So like I say, that is the sweet spot between selfish and selfless. When this first happened with my mom, I was selfless. Everything that I did was about her well-being, her care, talking to the doctors, the nurses, the social workers, all of that. And then I was eating fast food. I was grabbing and going. I was sitting a lot. I wasn't prioritizing my life at all. Like everything that I did, said for the most part, revolved around her. And so I didn't take time for myself at all. And it showed in unhealthy behaviors. I was gaining weight, which when you eat to self-soothe, you are gaining weight. That's counterproductive. And then you get depressed, right? So it was like I had this switch that went on and said, you know what? You have to take care of yourself. You have to be okay with going, taking some time off for yourself. I have a cabin in Western Maryland. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, that I've gone to, and I said that'll be my quarterly getaway, along with some smaller ones built in. But being okay with not feeling guilty to take time for myself. I work out every day. I try to, and I go to the basement. There was a time when my mom would yell and I would just run to every beck and call. And now I'm like, she good. You know what I mean? Like, or you know what? I turn my music up so I won't hear her. I ignore her, and there's nothing wrong with that. For the caregivers out there, make sure that you take time for you, regardless, if it's 5 minutes or whatever. But then that selfful piece. So that's being selfful. But then also, if you're taking care of someone, do things that you both can get enjoyment from. Like I say, my mom and I, we love watching game shows. So I don't feel like when I'm spending time with her in her room watching TV that I'm doing it just for her. I'm getting something from it as well. We do things, we like seafood. So eating those things together, it's something that we both get enjoyment from. The one thing that I want to do, and I've been talking about it, is learning how to play the bass guitar. And so I have it and everything. And I have a tambourine for her and a harmonica. So we, playing music and stuff together. So that's that piece where she's getting something from it and I am as well. And then there are times when I just do me, so that I can fill my cup in order for me to pour from an overflow versus the reserve.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Have you put any thought into doing retreats with the caregiver and?
Oh my gosh, that's funny that you say that, Sabrina. That's one of my long-term dreams, is to get a retreat center, like a waterfront where they both could come. We have awesome, I see it, I envision it, of course, that, I want to have my own before I plan one at a facility, because I don't, I know there'll be a lot of coordination, but I want to be able to set it up like I want it. Like I want really compassionate folks to work, GNAs, CNAs, nurses that have a heart to care for people. And I want to have it set up like, they have memory cafes for Alzheimer's patients where they can attend with their caregiver. But that is my dream, to have a beautiful home on the waterfront where they both could come for respite. We have things that they do separately and then things that they do together. So that's that, that selfulness piece. So yes, I definitely have. And so I'm going to take that and I'm going to write it down that this day, you even mentioned it, June 16th at 12:54.
There you go. There you go.
Yes.
I could totally see that. I think that would be something that would encourage the selffulness versus the selfishness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I think sometimes, no matter how many times you say it, caregivers would feel selfish.
Yeah.
Even though they know that they need it. They'll do it, but they'll still feel that like while they're there, while there's, they'll still kind of be winging. But if they're both going.
That is my dream. I have it written down. I know exactly what I want. And I said, because I mentioned it to my mom, I said, "Mom, how would you like
I love
that?"
it.
And she was like, "I love it." Right. And so, of course, some people need more care than others. Like my mother was a tube feeder. She's no longer a tube feeder. She's taking food by mouth, praise God. But, to make sure that we have the hospital beds, to make sure that we have everything that we need. And I think that this is like my training, on the job training. I'm on the ground. I'm seeing all of the needs that are required. And I said that not even from a selfish standpoint, but it also alleviates the stress of wondering what's happening with your loved one. So, you're there with them. Like you're not going to be with them all the time because you're going to get your your stuff in your yoga, your meditation, your massage therapy, your just fellowship with other caregivers. But then I was thinking we could do dinner together,
Yeah.
and then they go. And so, oh my gosh. Wow. That's just confirmation for me.
I love that. Absolutely. So now that we have a solid group of people that are here, they've been here, they're hanging out, they're interested, they're listening to you. I'm assuming they're resonating with you. Can you tell us more about your website, your social media, what you do, what you're growing? Give us a little background on that.
Absolutely. So my website is www.heycaregiver.com. And everything is on the website. My social media is linked from the website. My information about the Binti Circle, which is the support group that I mentioned for Black daughters caring for their parents. Information about the Binti Circle is there. You can, if you want to schedule a free discovery call, a coaching, if you're a caregiver, you can sign up there. There's a link for you to schedule an appointment. And then the Selfful Caregiver podcast. You can log in there and listen to some of our episodes. And if you want to be a guest, fill out the form. I would love to have you. And then, of course, we have our store where there is retail there for caregivers and careys, empowering, inspiring merchandise, and also fashionable.
I love that's the key.
So, yeah.
I love it. Absolutely. Social media. Is it all on there?
My IG, yep, is at Hey Caregiver. And then my personal, where I also share a lot of my caregiving journey, is at the Selfull, and that's SELFULL Caregiver.
Oh, wait, say it again. Let me write it down.
Okay. SELFULL Caregiver. The Selfull Caregiver.
This might be wrong. We have to.
Okay.
This is a IG. What is this?
IG.
Did you say the?
THE.
Okay, let's see if this is right. Hang on.
Okay. Yep, that's it. You got it. You got it. Mm-hmm.
Selfull Caregiver. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. So IG, there you go. Check it out. Yes. I love it. What's some advice you'd give to individuals who are just now falling into this role of caregiver? They're kind of floundering around. Their dreams might be at the coast here and they're feeling a little darkness. What's some advice you give to them?
Find your tribe. I say a tribe is a vibe. Find your community. I'm an only child. I'm single. I don't have children. So I can't really talk to those that are may have issues with their siblings, or, they're in the sandwich. We're all in the sandwich generation, but they're taking care of their kids and their parents. So find your tribe. There's something for everybody, and be open and honest. A lot of times we hold things so tight to our chest that no one can really help you. I feel like that. This is what I say. I say healing and help. It is where, no. Healing and hope, I think. Yeah, healing and hope is where honesty and transparency lies, or vice versa. So being honest, being transparent, you can get the healing and the hope there. Don't hold things too tight to your chest. Try to research as much as you can. Advocate, and make sure that you take care of you. Do not feel guilty at all.
100. I agree. I love it. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sabrina.
Your story's great. I'm so excited to see all of this unravel over the next few years and watch you grow and see all of the awesome, cool things that you decide to do with this new adventure that's been placed before you. I absolutely love it. For those of you watching live, thank you again for being here. Those of you watching on the replay and you've made it this far, be sure to hashtag replay so we know where you are and we can send you some love. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you that resonated with Dawnita and her story, be sure to follow her on Instagram and check out her website and all the social media handles. Reach out to her. She is a lovely woman, and she will be more than happy to help you, guide you in any area that you're needing some guidance in. So thank you for joining us here on Her Version. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast, make sure you subscribe, follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at heraversion.life under guest speaker. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth